The replenishment of the exchange fund, the soldiers of the 10th Edelweiss Brigade managed to film almost the entire process of a Russian being taken prisoner. Such a contactless method is not uncommon at the front. However, this case is unique because every movement of our soldiers and the enemies as well was recorded. Throughout the report, you will see a QR code on your screens. The unit's fighters are raising funds for a pickup truck. They will be grateful to all of us for donations toward this need. And now a spectacular and instructive story for the Russians from TSN correspondent Nelia Kowalska.
A field somewhere along the line of contact. At first it looks like a pile of garbage. Then the garbage starts to move.
Well, and these, I don't even know what to call them properly. Worms basically started to move.
It turned out there were actually two occupiers there. Alexander Karpovich, he's 25 years old, and just a year ago he lived in Volinohorsk and wrote software for drilling rigs. He has a family.
He has a very small child, just 7 months old, a loving wife, and also a dear mother.
He played football and did wrestling. Then he robbed a local official, and instead of serving time, he chose to sign a contract. He even came up with a motive.
To take revenge for his cousin's brother.
The interview with the Russian was recorded a few hours after this video, where he folded his hands in prayer.
He opened up alone and started showing like, oh, don't kill me. Yeah, like, please don't kill me. You know, with very expressive gestures and all. The pilots, as they say, kind of, you could definitely say, softened up a bit, basically.
Well, actually, we had already approached with the VOGs, which are the Voice of God announcements, and we were getting completely ready to drop them, yeah. We were fully prepared for their deployment, and then we saw those hands, and basically, for me, it always works on the level of exchange funds. That is, every prisoner I capture, for example, is a chance to bring one of our defenders back home.
This is the Ukrainian drone operator with the call sign Lana. It was she who came up with the idea to try to take the enemy prisoner.
We're corresponding with him. We dropped him some water with a message, and he writes messages back to us. This is, of course, pretty cool. I've never seen anything like this before.
That's how she and her comrade wrote messages on a bottle of water.
He says, you write it, and I say, I can't because I don't write in Russian. Like, I never learned that language. I can't write it.
My hands were already like this. I was already showing my hands like this. I surrender because they brought a bottle and it said, surrender, follow the drone, you will be helped.
The Russians receive the message, but apparently start arguing among themselves. Very little is known about the second occupier. 19 years old, call sign Frog. He didn't want to surrender.
Frog reported to the battalion commander that I was going to surrender, and they were already prepared. I hid under a bush and it hit 10 meters away.
The first note didn't help. I'm writing a second one.
Our pilots attach the second note to a grenade. The occupiers understand this hint better. Karpovich eventually does go after the drone. Frog stays in the field. What happened to Frog now? He's in the next world. How was he killed?
By air-dropped munitions.
One chose a better path, and the other's ass started to smoke. When we do what we have to do, I also feel like I saved my infantry's lives, for example. But it's also a chance to bring one of ours back from captivity. And for me, that was really, really the main point.
Lana says she later watched the interview with the prisoner.
I didn't recognize him because on camera, well, obviously after someone has spent a certain amount of time in those conditions, and I thought he was about 50 years old. He was all filthy, and I thought he was already an older man, but here he is, a young guy, actually even older than me, and I was like...
He drank urine, made filters from clothes, and drank urine.
Karpovich is now preparing for the exchange, and even suspects what will happen afterward.
Well, I'll serve my time. How much do they give for that? They give from 10 to 15 years for treason. I'll serve my sentence and return to my daughter. My daughter will grow up. She'll understand.
He urges other fellow compatriots not to sign any contracts and has important advice for those who already have done so.
Surrender, lay down your arms, and leave the territory of Ukraine.
Nelia Kowalska, Mikhailo Putyata, TSN 1+1, United News Marathon.
Ukraine's defense forces are narrowing the salient that formed near Dobropilya as a result of the Russian troops' breakthrough. The villages of Volodymyrivka, Pankivka, Mayak and Novotoretske in the Pokrovsk direction are gradually coming under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces. Counter-offensive actions are ongoing, even though the enemy is trying to prevent them. The occupiers have increased the number of kamikaze drones attacking our logistics and assault groups, especially near Pokrovsk, where the front line is now moving most actively. In addition, the enemy has intensified pressure on the village of Kotlin south of Pokrovsk. According to the deep state map, some positions have been lost there. In the Lyman sector, the situation is becoming more complicated around the villages of Novoselivka and Drobyshev, which our soldiers liberated during the Kharkiv counter-offensive. Here the enemy is trying to approach Sloviansk, and another hotspot is the Siversk direction. There the occupiers are getting closer and closer to this city. For many years he dreamed of the occupation of his own home. When the Russians launched their full-scale offensive, he found himself in that very occupation and ended up in captivity. Next is the story of our colleague Dmytro Kilyuk, a correspondent for the news agency Nian. In the very first days of the full-scale invasion, the Russians entered his village, and just 2 weeks later, they took Dmytro as a prisoner to jail. He was only able to be freed this year on Independence Day. But Dmytro Kilyuk told TSN correspondent Mariana Bukan about everything he experienced over the past 3.5 years.
Even before captivity, for about 3 to 5 years, I kept having the same dream. That somewhere around here, a fence had fallen, or rather, there was no fence at all. And that there were strangers in the house, I couldn't get them out, and I kept wondering what they were doing there. It actually came true for us, but it wasn't tied to the idea that there would be a war. I get
goosebumps, honestly, because there really was no fence here, and there was a tank standing here, and some people were living here. It's just
something I dreamed. It didn't make sense, it didn't come true, and that was about 10 years ago.
Now Dmytro Kilyuk is not at all surprised by his prophetic dream back then. We're walking through his native village of Kozarovichi in the Kiev region. The last time he walked here so freely was more than 3.5 years ago, at the very beginning of the full-scale war.
It was such a shock, such a lack of understanding of the situation, because my village, my homeland, my corner of the world had always been an absolutely safe place for me. And then, suddenly out of nowhere, some people grab you like a bolt from the blue.
That's how Dmytro remembers March 3rd, 2022. By then, the Russians had already entered his village. The Ukrainian army, while shelling them, accidentally hit Dmytro's house, and then the occupiers took him and his father away. They brought them here, to an industrial facility that at the time had been turned into a temporary prison.
We walked slowly from home, about 400 meters, with my jacket thrown over my head and back under the barrel of a gun. They led us away.
It was here that the Russians found out they had captured a Ukrainian journalist. For 2 weeks in captivity, the occupiers moved Dmytro from prison to prison in different settlements across the Kiev region. But it was the very first one, in his native village, that he remembered the most.
In Kozarovichi, the first 3 days were the worst hell. Some people were tied up, their legs and hands behind their backs, and they weren't even taken to the toilet for 3 days. It was the hardest and the scariest there.
By mid-March, he and the other prisoners were transported to neighboring Belarus. Before that, Dmytro had a conversation with one of the Russians, after which he understood. He wouldn't see his home anytime soon.
He told us, maybe they'll let you go, maybe they won't. He said, if the FSB officers call you in, try to ask them to let you go. That really made me uneasy. I realized that if you have to ask to be released, it probably means they won't let you go at all.
For the past 3.5 years, Ukrainian journalists, human rights activists, and simply his friends have been holding rallies in support of Dmytro and mentioning his captivity at various international platforms.
We are really waiting for him. We really want to hug him here in Ukraine, to hug him and not let go so that he can recover from the horror he has experienced.
And at home, Dima's parents were waiting for him.
Well, how can you not be feeling so deeply depressed when it's been so many long years, and after all, he's our only one?
Mr. Vasil and Dmytro were released by the occupiers after 9 days in captivity. All these long years he didn't know where his son was or what condition he was in. Because during all the time Dima was in captivity, the family didn't even receive a letter, just a tiny scrap, with just a few words.
My dear Mom and Dad, I am alive and well. Everything is fine with me, Dima.
The second message the parents got was a year ago, when a territorial defense fighter who had shared a cell with their son in a Russian prison was freed from captivity.
Dmytro Kilyuk is doing his best to hold on and sends his best regards to his loving parents and brother. He says he is alive and hopes that he will be freed.
Dmytro's mother outwardly seemed to be holding up better than his father. She welcomed guests, Dima's friends and colleagues, with a smile, and only occasionally allowed herself to cry, dreaming of the moment she would see her son again.
Shade it. Take a picture. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been complete without it. The day
of Dmytro Kilyuk's release happened on Ukraine's Independence Day. He immediately gets dressed and calls his loved ones.
I'm already in Ukraine. Everything is fine. Hello there. Hi. Hey. Hi.
Mom, what?
Hi, Mel. Hi.
Mel?
Hey there.
All right. Dimitro says that for 3 years he didn't know if his parents were alive or if his house was still standing. It was only this spring that the Russians gave him one of the letters from his family and colleagues, along with a photo of his parents.
That's all I received from the colony. In 3.5 years, this is from my colleagues. Well, they came together, but it's just one letter. A letter from my parents.
Has the house changed a lot?
On the outside, not at all. It hasn't changed if I look at it, except that the path here is now overgrown with flowers. These flowers weren't here before.
He walks around his own yard. The house that was hit by a shell has already been repaired. His car is in one of the garages.
They drove it, the so-called liberators. Then they say our guys drove it too. After the liberators, I don't know. He says it's not even worth repairing anymore.
In another garage are Dimitro's battered but beloved motorcycles. He plans to fix them. But, he says, it's obvious at first glance that the occupiers who took over his home stole a lot of things.
I don't know, they didn't go through people's things. Somewhere they did, somewhere they didn't. I know about all of them. I'll restore this later.
None of this really upsets Dimitro.
Of course, if you compare, it could have been worse. There are many people who lost their homes completely, and for me it would be a sin to complain, as they say.
The main thing, he says, is health. Both he and his parents need medical treatment now. Their son's captivity broke them deeply.
I honestly thought that I wouldn't be able to recognize him when I saw him. I thought he'd be so tormented, so worn out. But it turned out not to be the case, and I'm very happy about that.
Dima already knows what he'll do after rehabilitation. He says he won't give up journalism, but the main topic of his work will be captivity and release.
You're nothing. In captivity, you're nothing, nobody. No matter how great the danger, you're free. You can go this way, you can go the other way. If you want, you can hide from the shelling, or you can choose not to hide. In other words, you decide your own fate, but there you don't decide your fate. Freedom is probably the most important thing. It's more important than bread, it's more important than oxygen, than anything else. Because when people don't have freedom, they have nothing.
Mariana Bukan, Ihor Sir, Anatoly Korob, TSN 1+1 Marathon United News.